97.3 ESPN presents The Sports Bash with Mike Gill. It's time for Football at 4 with 97.3 ESPN.com's Andrew DiCecco. Powered by the Inside the Birds podcast.
We recognize the ability of the roster that's put together right now. And I think we have the ability to do something really special with this group, but it's going to take a lot of hard work.
Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios, it's Football at 4.
All right, Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast and brought to you by PlaySugarHouse.com. Sign up now. They'll match your first deposit up to $250. Andrew DiCecco is in the house. We got a lot of football to dive into on this Tuesday. Jim Schwartz today speaking, Dave Phipps speaking, some of the Eagle players speaking as well. We'll get some more opinions now from Andrew DiCecco here on Football at 4. And I want to start off with the conversation we were having right before the hour began. Today, Jim Schwartz said that Avonte Maddox, Andrew, will be back on the outside when he is healthy and ready to go, which we presume this week. He was active last week. He played some zone schemes for them and some special team stuff. But getting Maddox back, does that change the level of defense that we should see from this Eagles team?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly helps. I mean, you never want to have a 5'7" corner in Nickell Robey-Coleman or Crayvon LeBlanc outside or Will Parks playing on the outside. Avonte Maddox is the best option that they have to play in that second cornerback spot. Is he ideal? No, he's ideally more of a nickel corner, which I think will ultimately be his role next season. But as far as what they have to work with right now, that certainly is an added advantage.
Yeah, I know you were high on Robey-Coleman when he got here. He's been a little disappointing, but some of that is because he's out of position, I guess. I mean, does he slide back into that slot, and do you now get back him playing the position he belongs and Maddox in his spot out there? And I guess LeBlanc kind of becomes the reserve there. But do you expect Robey-Coleman to maybe have a better showing than he's had so far back in that slot?
Yeah, I do. Once you get him back to his natural position, I think he should be playing a little bit more to the level that we've all grown accustomed to him playing over the past few seasons. But that's not to negate the effort that he's played with as far as the tackling concerns. And it seemed like he kind of gave up on that Daniel Jones run down the field. These are certain areas that he's going to have to clean up, that no matter what position you're in, you have to be able to make these plays.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, what has been the most disappointing part about Robey-Coleman? Like, why did you like him as a fit when they signed him, and what has disappointed you about him now that he's here?
Well, I liked his physicality for being only 5'7". I thought he was around the football a lot. He was a sound tackler. He was a good blitzer. He just closed on the football well. I just liked his scrappy demeanor. Now, I haven't really seen that. We haven't really seen that since he's been here in Philadelphia. He seems to be, trailing receivers. His tackling has been shoddy. He just hasn't been the player that, he was advertised as being over his, the past few seasons where he has been. He was regarded as being a top 5 slot corner in football. But now, we're entering week 8 and we really haven't seen that out of him. But now the light switch is going to have to come on soon, or it's going to continue to be a platoon between him and Crayvon LeBlanc.
What have you seen out of Will Parks since his return?
Will Parks has been okay. I mean, this is, after 2 games, he hasn't really made an impact one way or the other. Now, he was trailing Ingram on that play where Evan Ingram dropped the football. It'd be a lot different conversation had Evan Ingram caught that football and the Eagles lost that game on account of that coverage. But I think overall, Will Parks has been okay. I would like to see him cover the tight ends, more efficiently and more frequently. That's kind of what he's brought in to do with that body type and his versatility. I'd like to see him deployed more on blitzes and kind of, roam around, use him as a Swiss Army knife. And, it's only been 2 games, so I don't want to get ahead of myself too much, but he's been touted for his versatility and his ability to kind of move all around the field and impact the passing, slow down the aerial attacks, I should say, and we really haven't seen that yet.
Yeah, and I'm interested to get your take on what they do with Mills. What kind of role does he have going forward here? I mean, with Maddox back, and Parks back, where does Mills fit in?
I think Mills is going to be the starting safety. He'll be a starting safety opposite Rodney McLeod. I think someone like Will Parks is best utilized as not really having a role, being a positionless defensive back where you can move him around and let him roam around the secondary, and Jim Schwartz can deploy him wherever he sees fit based on the looks that he's getting. I think that's his best role. But I think Jalen Mills will continue to be in that, in that strong safety spot.
We talk about all these names in the secondary, I feel, every week, and you just mentioned Rodney McLeod. We knew that he would have to step up with Malcolm Jenkins leaving as more of a veteran presence and more of a leader out there. Do you like what you've seen out of Rodney McLeod to this point?
Mostly, yes. I would say that Rodney has been, his stats haven't been, super gaudy or anything, but he's been that one player. I believe he's played every single defensive snap for the Eagles. He was a little bit out of position. He was actually the primary culprit in that Daniel Jones run that I mentioned earlier, the one in which he fell with nobody around. But that was Rodney's responsibility. But overall, outside of a blemish or two, I thought he's been a very consistent presence in the secondary, which is what you really would expect from a veteran of Rodney's caliber. And I like the leadership and the toughness that he brings, and he kind of is the glue that keeps that secondary together.
Hey, I wanted to get your take on, we were discussing right before you came on, too. We're talking about the secondary. Eli Apple release. Any interest? Would he be a guy that would help this defense out? I know he's been bouncing all over the place. Neither one of us really all that intrigued, but was the 10th pick, local kid. And I know he didn't, he's been injured a lot, too.
Yeah, I thought I might be asked about Eli Apple. That's a resounding no from me. He's been bouncing around bunch of different rosters. He hasn't been able to stick in one position. You mentioned he was a first-round pick, and he is young. He is a young player, but, with that said, having someone of that, with that pedigree bounce around all these different teams and not be able to find a consistent role on any of those teams is concerning. And, if I'm the Eagles, I'm staying away.
Yeah, I know he was all right with the Saints, and then they decided not to retain him, and that's not like a defensive powerhouse down there. And then, at my point, if Matt Rule gives up on you, I mean, he seems like a guy who would be, hey, we're going to give guys chances. He gave him a chance, and if he decides can't do it, that tells me, I think, all I kind of need to know about Eli Apple. But what is, other than the linebacker spot, which we know the limitations of the Eagles linebackers, how do you feel about the rest of this defense? We're getting about halfway through this. The team's starting to get a little healthy here. You're starting to get back to full strength. The defense is pretty much at full strength, other than Malik Jackson being out. How do you feel about this defense moving forward, especially when you stack them up with Seattle doesn't have very good defense, New Orleans defense is iffy, Green Bay's defense is okay. How do you feel about this Eagles defense?
Well, I like the way that the defense is trending, but they do have some problem areas there, such as the middle of the field. Outside of linebacker, they haven't been well adept at covering the middle of the field from the nickel corner spot. They've been giving a lot of yards to slot receivers such as Tyler Boyd and the Rams receivers that lined up in that role, Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods. And then you look at outside corner. Outside of Darius Slay, that second corner spot, no matter who lines up there, is going to be targeted early and often from whatever team they play, and it's going to be Avonte Maddox. Avonte Maddox is 5'9". No matter what receiver you put against Avonte Maddox on the outside, they're gonna have that catch radius. They're gonna have that size advantage over him. Avonte is as scrappy as he is, as instinctual as he is. He's not going to win routinely on those contested ball situations, and those are areas of opportunities that teams are going to continue to pounce on with the Eagles.
What have you thought about Hargrave's production since coming back from the injury? We talked about him when he came here, like this big signing, playing next to Fletcher Cox and being in the mix with Malik Jackson. And I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I feel like I'm a little bit underwhelmed at this point.
No, I don't think it's just you, Hunter. I would agree with that. I think that when, Hargrave, who was brought in, he was touted as this, that was the Eagles' prize free agent signing, and he was very much an ascending player, and he still is in some regard. He's only 27 years old, but you haven't really. It's been a very slow progression with Javon. Obviously, he had the pec injury and missed some time this summer. He's still getting his sea legs, in the early part of the season, but now you're not really seeing much penetration from him. He does occupy blockers, which does open up things for other defenders to make plays, which doesn't show up on the stat sheet, but. You look to see he's coming off a career season with the Pittsburgh Steelers, and you really haven't seen much of anything from him as far as taking down quarterbacks, tackles for loss, things of that nature. And those are things that if he really starts to round into form, we talk about the Eagles' defense trending in the positive direction. Well, that's a key player here, and he hasn't shown much yet, but he has done some encouraging things as far as, occupying blockers and opening things up for his teammates.
Yeah, and I guess take it for what it's worth. I mean, he hasn't got the stats, but Brandon Graham has 6 sacks this year. You got more sacks from him, more production. And that's what Hargrave did a great job of in Pittsburgh is he took up double teams and got push that you had to double team him, and it allowed other guys to get sacks. So this Eagles defensive line, if they can continue to get to the quarterback, that could be a big game changer because, look, they've played the Giants, who have a terrible offensive line, Cincinnati, awful offensive line. This Dallas team has an awful offensive line. And if they can't get pressure against teams like that, they might need to change their game plan.
Exactly. And that's the one thing that you're seeing here. I thought that they would have had more success against the New York Giants, particularly going after Andrew Thomas, their left tackle. I thought Josh Sweat and Derek Barnett would have had a little bit more opportunities to create some pressure on Daniel Jones. I thought Jannard Avery, he didn't play at all on defense. I went into the game thinking he would at least see 12 to 16 snaps, and they would attack that side of that edge, and it really didn't happen. Like you said, they need to be able to capitalize on some of these porous offensive lines because the Eagles' defensive line, that is their calling card. That's what's going to be able to keep them in games. And if they're not able to get home, obviously Jim Schwartz doesn't believe in blitzing very much if they don't get home with their front four. The back end is going to be susceptible to some big plays.
Yeah, I know, too. The back end you mentioned. Darius Slay, he's obviously their guy. This week it's an interesting matchup, though. You got CeeDee Lamb, you got Amari Cooper, who's really had good games against the Eagles. Gallup has had some good games. How do you see the secondary matching up with Dallas? I know you might get Ben DiNucci and you might get Andy Dalton, but they do have some playmakers.
Yeah, and no matter who's throwing the football, they're going to have an advantage at their wide receiver position. I mean, I thought Andy Dalton, as many games as he started in the NFL, I did not see the offense sputtering quite like it did with him at the helm. That was kind of surprising me because he should be able to put up 28 points with his eyes closed with that kind of talent around him. But you have someone like Ben DiNucci, yes, there's going to be opportunities. I think that you're going to see Darius Slay on Amari Cooper, and CeeDee Lamb's played a lot from the slot, so you're going to see some Nickell Robey-Coleman, probably some Strap because he has a little bit more size to him, a little bit more length from the cornerback spot. And then on the other side, Michael Gallup, you're going to probably see he's going to see a lot of Avonte Maddox. So that's kind of how I see that shaping out.
Yeah, I know today Jim Schwartz was asked about Alex Singleton and the blitzing role, and he kind of insinuated that we're not calling blitzes. He's kind of using some intuition there. But are you getting some sense that Schwartz is starting to trust Singleton more and that he is becoming more of their main linebacker? We kind of hit on this a little bit yesterday, but after hearing him talk about that today, it almost seems like Schwartz is now kind of looking at Singleton as the main linebacker.
Yeah, and to an extent, that's a little bit scary, knowing that he was he was nearly on the outs when they were during roster cutdowns. But yeah, Alex Singleton is the Eagles' best linebacker, and he has shown a lot over the past few weeks as far as being an instinctual player that swarms to the football, did a great job disengaging from blockers, diagnosing plays fairly quickly. Just a lot of instinctual plays that you're not seeing from the other players that they have there. And I think he keeps stacking these good games on top of one another. And when you keep doing that, you're proving that one game wasn't a fluke. This is the player that he is. And he is able to make these plays. And I think, I mean, obviously, ideally, on any team around the NFL, Alex Singleton's probably a third or fourth linebacker, but with the Eagles, he's their best linebacker. And until he proves that that he can't hold his own out there, I think he deserves to be out there. He's proven with every opportunity he's been given that he can find the football and make positive plays when he's out there.
Well, in a league where they want the undersized, faster guys, I mean, he brings that to the table at least, and I think he at least has linebacker skill and intuition. That to me is something that Geary lacks the most, is just having the intuition of being a linebacker. I mean, obviously he was a safety in college, and I think he lacks that when you see his footwork and his reads out there. I just don't think he understands the linebacker position fully yet.
Well, where I think Nathan Gary particularly struggles is from an eye discipline standpoint. Oftentimes quarterbacks are able to fool him with their eyes. He gets caught often looking into the backfield, and he doesn't have the makeup speed, the instincts to be able to close on the football late. If he's off a beat or two, well, guess what? Teams are going to attack him, and they have been attacking him with at a high frequency, and he's been giving up plays. He just doesn't have the football IQ that for some reason Jim Schwartz has always touted him for. He keeps getting fooled by undisciplined mistakes, and he's very easily manipulated.
Andrew DiCecco, Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Today, Dave Phipp, he was asked about Jake Elliott. It sounds like, and I'm included on that, no one's hitting the panic button on Jake Elliott. He missed a 29-yarder, but most of his misses have been 50-pluses, and I'm not going to get on a guy for missing a 50-yarder every now and then, but are you concerned about Elliott? Because it seems that question is starting to come up from more people.
Yeah, initially I kind of brushed it aside, and I thought he kind of worked his way out of it, and then you start to see it rear its head again last week with, a miss that we haven't grown accustomed to seeing Jake miss in quite some time. I think now it's gonna sound off some alarms here when you're seeing your normally short-footed kicker miss these routine kicks. And when you really look around the NFL, the kickers around the NFL, it's one of those positions where you're starting to see, with the exception of maybe 3 or 4 guys that are really entrenched as being one of the prominent kickers in the NFL. You're seeing a lot of guys shuffling in and out of rosters. A lot of teams are keeping a second kicker on the practice squad because they might not be 100% sold or confident on the ones that they have. And there's just not a whole lot of stability from that position. I think still, Jake's errors, recent miscues aside, I still think he's one of the better kickers in the National Football League. However, he needs to get this corrected over the next couple of weeks, or he won't be, the shelf life for kickers have proven that he's not going to be around here much longer.
Another thing that was mentioned was DeSean Jackson wanted to go back and return that punt. There was some conversation about, was it the right move by Doug Peterson to put him back there? He's a guy coming back from injury who's clearly limited. Is it worth putting him in that spot? Well, now you hear that DeSean Jackson was the one that was vocal about wanting to go back there. Does that change your thoughts at all?
No, not really. I mean, in that situation, the Eagles put DeSean in there for a home run type of situation when they're trying to make a big play or close out a game or something of that effect. And obviously, Greg Ward is their primary returner. Greg Ward is more of a sure-handed guy that you want back there that's going to cleanly field the ball. He might give you 6 or 7 yards per return, but he's not going to break the long one. DeSean has that home run ability, and every once in a while to make a cameo back there, I think that was always the plan. I don't necessarily fault anyone for that. It was a dirty hit. It was a late hit, and that shouldn't have happened. And had that not happened, we weren't even talking about this.
Yeah, I know Jackson apparently, asked, as you mentioned, to get back there. But I like what you said about Ward. I mean, in that situation, I was just, my point was just have a guy back there to catch the ball, and that's basically what Ward has done. But the punt returner spot has been a problem because basically Ward is a guy who's not a punt returner. The guy was a quarterback in college. Hey, go back there and field punts for us. So it is a problem. That position has been a little bit of an issue for them.
Yeah, it has, and they don't have that game breaker from that punt return spot. And like I said, you need to flip the field position. Greg Ward's not going to be that guy, but he is going to be someone that you can confidently say, if he's back there, he's sure-handed, he's going to catch it. You remember Reno Mahe, of course, from the early 2000s. He was another guy that, he always got ribbed for fair catching the football, but he rarely ever dropped it. And when they got rid of Reno and they brought in J.R. Reed and they had Greg Lewis fielding punts and they both fumbled it, again, I think it was in the season opener in 2007. Guess who they called back? Reno Mahe, and He did the same thing. He averaged like 5 yards of return, but they could confidently put him back there and know that he was going to field the football cleanly. So I think there's something to be said for that. But like you said, they don't have that game breaker back there, and that's going to be a problem because look up and down the roster. Outside of DeSean Jackson, there's really nobody else that they could put back there outside of maybe a John Hightower, and John Hightower was primarily a kick returner at Boise State.
Right, I was going to say, there's a lot of these guys, your Boston Scotts, Killins, Huntley, Quez Watkins. None of those guys were punt return players?
No, Killins was a kick returner at UCF, as small as he is, as unbelievable as that might sound. But these are guys that I think if you're the Eagles or Dave Phipp, you don't want to put those guys. That's not the time to test that out. I think that's an experience. That's a classic example of something that would have been best served, to kind of play around with that in the preseason, which no one had. And it's not time to kind of run that trial during the regular season games. I think when they look at it in those terms, I think, okay, let's just put Greg Ward back there. We know what we're going to get. We'll take our 6 yards, get the offense back out there, and go from there. But they do have a lot of these return type of guys, but without a preseason, really know what they can do. It's kind of hard to put them back there when in a live game setting.
No, that's a good point. That's one thing that you lose is these running backs or these wide receivers, these younger rookies that you might give them an opportunity to win that job in preseason games. That being, a lot of people look at these preseason games anymore and say, you can't get anything from them. Nobody plays anyway. But there's a position right there where you can win a job and show a coach that, hey, I can catch and field the punt in a live situation that you don't get anymore.
Yeah, exactly. And that's another reason why preseason play is integral to what to what goes into a season, to the roster decisions and things like that. A lot of young players maybe were proficient returners but never got a chance to show that. Well, they were on the outside looking in when cutdowns were taking place because they never had that opportunity. And I think those are certain areas when you're looking at those that 50, 51, 52, 53 spot when you're making those decisions. That's a classic example of why the preseason is so important.
All right, Andrew DiCecco, Football at 4. A look at the Eagles against the Cowboys. You noted today that Carson Wentz has played pretty well in games against the Dallas Cowboys. I would imagine that with this defense, that the Eagles offense, if they can't right the ship against this defense, then you could be looking at a tough year offensively, because this is a game where they should be able to put up 30, 35 points.
Yeah, the Dallas defense is not just the Dallas defense. The entire Dallas team right now they're kind of spiraling in the other direction. You're starting to see things fracture within the infrastructure of the team and the locker room and things of that nature. And this is the opportune spot for the Eagles to really pounce on a wounded team and a team that's kind of in disarray and put up some points. If they struggle with the Dallas Cowboys, given everything that's going on, that's going to be problematic, because the Dallas defense is not a very good unit right now, and there's areas to exploit on the back end, in the running game, and the linebackers. You can get those guys out in space. There's just areas for the Eagles to really exploit, and if they're not able to do that, that's going to be cause for concern.
Yeah, I was going to say, there's areas all over the field, and Carson Wentz, maybe he hasn't. One thing, he had the high tower throw for 50 yards or so last week, but I'd like to see him get a little bit better throwing the ball out of the backfield to these running backs. I feel like that's an area where he's still struggling a bit, is connecting with Boston Scott, and even when Miles Sanders is back there, I feel like that's an area where I'd like to see him improve some more, is throw the ball to the backs out of the backfield, because I feel like there's a lot of big plays they miss in that game.
Yeah, and part of the selling point for keeping a guy like a Boston Scott and Corey Clement, instead of getting that between the tackles bulldozers, we don't have that big guy, but we do have two pass receiving running backs that we use and can give a spark to the offense. Well, we really haven't seen much of that outside of maybe last week when you got Boston Scott involved in the passing game. I would like to see a little bit more of that, because you saw what Corey Clement has done over his career, and Boston Scott, that's his strength. So get those guys out in space. Take advantage of the linebackers' inability to cover a lot of ground, and really get them isolated on those guys, and let them kind of just go from there and add another layer to the offense.
He's Andrew DiCecco, DiCecco NFL. Follow him on Twitter. And, of course, he, like August, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda Hotline, the Football at 4 powered by the Inside the Birds podcast right here on the Sports Bash. Eagles-Cowboys Sunday night. Andrew's back on Monday to recap it all. Andrew, appreciate it, man.
My pleasure, guys. Take care.
All right, there you go. In Football at 4, it is brought to you by PlaySugarHouse.com. Sign up now. They'll match your first deposit up to $250.